The station hummed with life. Thousands of species moved through the corridors of Union Central, the heart of the Galactic Union. Captain Day stood on the observation deck and watched the ships come and go. He had been here for 12 years now, and he still found it beautiful. His communicator buzzed. It was Hana calling from the lower engineering deck. Day, we have a problem with Gate 7. The resonance is off again. Day smiled. Hana always knew when something was wrong before the computers did. I'll be right there. He took the elevator down 20 levels. The engineering section was hot and loud. Massive machines powered the quantum gates that connected thousands of worlds across the galaxy. Without these gates, travel would take lifetimes instead of hours. Hana was pressed against the primary conduit, her eyes closed. Her hand rested on the metal surface. To anyone else, she looked like she was sleeping. But Day knew better. She was listening. There, she said, opening her eyes. Section 12. The harmonic buffer is starting to fail. We have maybe 3 days before it shows up on the sensors. Day checked his scanner. Everything read normal. He had learned not to question Hana. She had been right too many times. Get a repair crew ready. I'll file the maintenance request. Across the station, Tay was plotting navigation routes through subspace. The young man stared at his screens, but his mind was somewhere else. He was mapping the invisible currents of space-time, finding paths that no computer could calculate. He saw patterns where others saw chaos. This route should cut travel time to the outer rim by 18%, he said to his supervisor, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms. The supervisor looked at the route. The computer says this path is unstable. The computer is using old data. The gravitational fields shifted last month. I checked. The supervisor was doubtful, but Tay had been right before. They approved the route for testing. 2 weeks later, it became the new standard path. Trade ships saved millions in fuel costs. Humans were everywhere in the Union. They worked jobs that others found too difficult or too boring. They fixed things that seemed impossible to fix. They solved problems that had no clear solution. Nari, a human diplomat, sat in a negotiation room with 2 species that hated each other. The Vren looked like giant insects. The Lothari were made of living crystal. They had been enemies for 200 years. You don't understand our culture, the Vren ambassador clicked. You show no respect for our traditions, the Lothari sang, in musical tones. Nari had spent 6 months learning about both species. She understood something that neither of them could see. They were actually very similar. Both valued honor above all else. Both had deep family bonds. Both had been hurt by centuries of conflict. What if? Nari said carefully. We started with something small. The Vren value directness. The Lothari value ceremony. What if the Vren could be direct in their communications, but the Lothari could frame the meetings with traditional protocols? Each side gives something. Each side gets something. It was such a simple idea. But no one had thought of it before. The 2 ambassadors looked at each other. Slowly, carefully, they began to talk. 3 months later, they signed a peace treaty. It was the first time in 2 centuries, but not everyone was happy about the humans. Elder Voshkan of the Korathi species watched all of this with growing concern. The Korathi had founded the Galactic Union 10,000 years ago. They were the leaders, the visionaries, the ones who had built everything. And now, humans were everywhere. They are too unpredictable, Voshkan said to the council. They break protocols. They don't follow the proper procedures. They question our decisions. But they get results, another council member said. That's exactly the problem, Voshkan replied. They get results through chaos, through improvisation. This is not the Union way. We have rules and systems for a reason. Other species began to agree. The humans were useful, yes, but they were also uncomfortable. They didn't specialize. They didn't have one great achievement. They were just average at everything, and somehow that made them essential to everything. It wasn't right. The political campaign started slowly. Small complaints. Minor incidents blown out of proportion. Humans were too aggressive. Too emotional. Too willing to ignore traditions. They were changing the Union in ways that felt wrong. Day noticed the change in how people looked at him. The friendly greetings became shorter. His suggestions in meetings were questioned more. Human proposals took longer to get approved. Something's happening, he told Hana one day. They were eating lunch in the station cafeteria. I've noticed it too, she said. People are different now. Wu joined them. He was the chief engineer for all of Union Central. His hands were always dirty from working on machines. He preferred it that way. Did you hear? Wu said. The council is debating the human question. What question? Day asked. Whether humans belong in the Union. The table went quiet. For 15 years, the debate continued. The Korathi built their case carefully. They used fear and resentment. They pointed to every human mistake and ignored every human success. They made humans seem dangerous. Other species that were jealous of human success joined the movement. Species that lost contracts to human companies. Politicians who lost elections to human candidates. Workers who were passed over for promotions given to humans. The vote finally came. 47 species would decide humanity's fate. Day watched the council session on a screen in the engineering bay. Hana stood beside him. Tay was there too. So was Wu, and dozens of other human workers. One by one, the species voted. Some voted to keep humans. Many voted to expel them. The final count was close, but clear. Humanity was expelled from the Galactic Union. They had 6 months to leave. All 4 billion humans across 3,000 worlds had to go back to Earth. Everything they had built, every relationship they had formed, every home they had made, all of it had to be abandoned. Day read the evacuation order. His hands shook slightly. 12 years of work, 12 years of friendships and accomplishments, gone in a single vote. Hana put her hand on his shoulder. What do we do now? Day looked around at the engineering bay. The machines hummed their usual song. Gate 7 was running perfectly now. Thanks to Hana's early warning. Everything was working smoothly. We document everything, he said. We train our replacements. We do the job right, even if they don't deserve it, because that was what humans did. Even when they were treated unfairly, they did the work. They kept things running. They helped people. It was who they were. Wu left his post at the primary junction relay that afternoon. He had maintained that system for 15 years. He knew every circuit, every fluctuation, every quirk. He had spent more time with that machine than with any person. He filed his resignation and walked away without looking back. On worlds across the galaxy, humans began to pack. They said goodbye to alien friends who wept at their leaving. They closed businesses. They deactivated equipment. They prepared to leave everything behind. And the Galactic Union, relieved to have solved their human problem, celebrated. Elder Voshkan gave a speech about returning to traditional values, about maintaining the purity of the Union's mission. The humans were gone. Everything would be better now, or so they thought. The evacuation ships filled the sky above Union Central. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Day watched from the engineering bay as his team prepared to leave. They had spent the last 3 months training their replacements. It had not gone well. Hana was showing Thalman how to maintain the quantum gates for the 7th time. Thalman was Korathi, with crystalline features that glowed faintly in the dim light. He was smart and capable, but he didn't understand. You have to listen to the machine, Hana explained. Feel the vibrations. The sensors will tell you when something is wrong. But by then, it's too late. You need to catch problems before they start. Thalman checked his data pad. The sensors are very advanced. They monitor thousands of variables every second. They will alert us to any anomalies. Sure, Hana said. But sensors measure what already happened. You need to predict what will happen next. How? Thalman asked. Hana pressed her hand against the conduit. You feel it. Right here, there's a slight variation in the harmonic frequency. It's within normal range, but it's changing. In about 2 days, it will start to drift. In 4 days, the sensors will notice. In 6 days, the gate will shut down. Thalman scanned the conduit. All readings are normal. For now, Hana said. But check this section in 2 days. You'll see. She didn't add that by then she would be halfway back to Earth. Thalman would have to figure it out himself. In the diplomatic wing, Nari was packing her office. The walls were covered with pictures. Vren and Lotharii standing together, smiling in their own ways. Peace treaties, cultural exchange programs, trade agreements. All her work. A Korathi official came to collect her files. He looked through them with disinterest. These are notes on cultural mediation protocols, Nari explained. The Vren need direct communication. They get upset if you're too polite. But the Lotharii need formal greetings. They feel disrespected without them. You have to balance both in every meeting. The official nodded without really listening. We have standard diplomatic procedures. These species don't follow standard procedures. That's why they were at war for 200 years. Thank you for your service, the official said, dismissing her. Nari left her office for the last time. She wondered how long the peace would last. Tay was in the navigation center, transferring his route data. He had mapped 17 new paths through subspace. Each one required constant monitoring and adjustment. The gravitational fields shifted. Space-time currents changed. What worked yesterday might not work tomorrow. You'll need to recalibrate these routes every few weeks, he told his replacement, a being with 6 eyes and tentacles instead of arms. The computer will handle recalibration automatically, his replacement said. The computer uses mathematical models, but space doesn't follow perfect math. You have to adjust for things the computer doesn't measure. Like what? I don't know how to explain it, Tay admitted. You just know when a route feels wrong. Great. His replacement looked confused. Tay didn't blame him. He wasn't sure he understood it himself. On Earth, the returning humans faced chaos. 4 billion people arriving all at once. The planet hadn't been this crowded in centuries. Ships landed every hour. Families reunited. Others mourned friends left behind. Jin stood in the central coordination office, staring at a wall of screens. He had been a logistics coordinator for the Union, managing supply chains across 70 sectors. Now he was trying to feed 4 billion people on one planet. We need housing, someone said. We need food, another person added. We need water purification systems. We need power generation. Jin held up his hand for quiet. His mind was already working through the problems. Okay. First, we use the old colony domes. They've been abandoned for a century, but they're still functional. Get repair crews on them. Second, Mina, I need you to calculate food production capacity. We'll need to expand farming immediately. Third, Power will repurpose the evacuation ships as temporary power generators. That's against regulations, someone said. Jin laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. We're not in the Union anymore. There are no regulations. We do what works. Mina, the agricultural specialist, was already running calculations. We can increase production by 40% if we use fast-growth crops. It won't be fancy, but people won't starve. Do it, Jin said. Across the galaxy, the last human ships departed. Day commanded the final engineering vessel, leaving Union Central. He stood on the bridge and watched the massive station shrink in the view screen. Course set for Earth, the pilot said. Take us home, Day replied. He felt empty. 12 years of his life were on that station. Friends, memories, purpose, all left behind. Hana stood beside him. Do you think they'll be okay? Day shook his head. No, but that's not our problem anymore. The jump to hyperspace was smooth. The ship that carried them was human-built, maintained by humans, navigated by humans. It worked perfectly. Behind them, the Galactic Union began its new era without humanity. Elder Voshkan addressed the council with pride. Today marks a return to our founding principles. We have removed the chaos. We have restored order. The Union will thrive once more. There was applause, cheers, relief. But in the engineering bays, the machines hummed a slightly different tune. The quantum gates cycled normally, but there were tiny fluctuations that the sensors didn't quite catch. Nothing important, nothing worth worrying about. Thalmin checked his readings at the end of his first solo shift. Everything was normal. He felt proud. The humans had made it seem so complicated. But it was simple, really. Just follow the procedures, trust the sensors, do the job by the book. 2 days later, exactly as Hana had predicted, the harmonic frequency in Section 12 began to drift. The sensors didn't notice. They were measuring other variables, more important ones, according to the programming. Thalmin didn't notice either. He was following his checklist, and the checklist said everything was fine. In the diplomatic wing, the Vren and Lothari ambassadors had their first meeting without Nari. The Korathi official who replaced her followed standard protocols. He greeted both ambassadors with the same formal words. Same tone. Same gestures. The Vren felt insulted by the unnecessary ceremony. The Lothari felt disrespected by the lack of proper traditional greetings. Both left the meeting angry. The navigation center logged its first complaint. One of Tay's routes had become unstable. Ships reported unexpected turbulence. The computer said the route was fine. The mathematical models showed no problems. But the ships knew something was wrong. On a mining world in the Outer Rim, the automated supply delivery was late. Jin would have anticipated the delay. There was a festival that week, so shipping would be slower. He would have sent the supplies early, but Jin was gone, and the AI system followed its standard schedule. The miners ran out of food for 3 days before emergency supplies arrived. These were small problems. Tiny cracks in a massive structure. The Union had existed for 10,000 years. It would take more than a few glitches to bring it down, but the cracks were there. Growing, spreading. On Earth, humans were rebuilding their lives. Sung, a historian, watched news feeds from Union space. He saw the small reports. Equipment malfunctions, diplomatic tensions, trade delays, minor incidents. He started keeping records, taking notes. He wanted to document what was about to happen. Because he knew what the Galactic Union didn't know yet. They hadn't expelled workers. They had expelled the people who made everything work. The ones who caught problems before they became disasters. The ones who understood that systems needed more than procedures. They needed care, attention, intuition. The Union was about to learn a hard lesson. Systems were fragile, and the humans who held everything together were gone. Sung made his first entry in his historical log, Day 1 of the collapse. They don't see it yet, but it's already begun. 3 months after the humans left, Gate 7 at Union Central failed. It happened during a busy trading day. Ships were queuing to jump to other systems. Then suddenly, the gate shut down. No warning. No alarm. Just darkness. Thalmin rushed to the control center. His screens showed normal readings. According to every sensor, the gate was functioning perfectly. But ships were stuck. Cargo was delayed. Captains were demanding answers. Run a full diagnostic, his supervisor ordered. They ran every test they had. Every procedure in the manual. All readings came back normal. The gate should be working. But it wasn't. Restart the system, the supervisor finally said. They shut down the gate and started it again. It powered up normally. Ships began jumping again. Problem solved. Except, it wasn't solved. 2 weeks later, Gate 7 failed again. Then Gate 12. Then Gate 3. Each time, the diagnostics showed nothing wrong. Each time, a restart fixed it temporarily. The engineers were confused. They had followed every procedure Hana had documented. They maintained the equipment exactly as instructed. But the gates kept failing. What they didn't understand was that Hana's procedures were just the basics. The real work had been in what she felt, not what she measured. The tiny vibrations that warned of problems hours before they appeared on sensors. The subtle changes in harmonics that meant a component was starting to wear down. Thalmin stood in the engineering bay, frustrated. He pressed his hand against the conduit the way he had seen Hana do. He felt the metal. the warmth, the vibration, but he didn't understand what any of it meant. To him, it was just a humming machine. In the navigation center, ships were reporting problems with Tay's routes. The paths that had worked perfectly for months were now unstable. Ships experienced turbulence. Some got lost in subspace and needed rescue. The navigation team studied Tay's calculations. They made sense mathematically. The routes should work, but they didn't. What Tay had never written down was how he adjusted his routes constantly. Every few days, he checked the gravitational fields. He felt the currents of space-time. He made tiny corrections that kept the paths stable. It wasn't in any manual because he did it automatically, without thinking. Now no one was making those corrections. The routes slowly degraded until they became dangerous. 6 months after the humans left, 3 gates suffered catastrophic failures. Not just shutdowns. Complete system collapses. 200 ships were stranded in subspace, caught between destinations with no way forward or back. Rescue operations took weeks. Some ships ran out of life support before help arrived. 73 beings died. The Union mourned. Investigations were launched, but no one could figure out what went wrong. The truth was simple. The gates needed humans. They needed people who could sense problems before the machines could measure them. But that truth was too uncomfortable to accept. Trade across the Union began to slow. Captains were afraid to use the gates. The routes that had connected thousands of worlds for centuries were no longer reliable. Ships started using slower, older methods of travel. This created new problems. Supply chains that depended on fast delivery collapsed. Fresh food spoiled in transit. Medical supplies arrived too late. Critical parts for repairs took months instead of days. On Talos 4, an agricultural world that fed 30 systems, the automated irrigation systems failed. The sensors said everything was fine. The computers followed their programs, but the crops died. Human agronomists had been making constant adjustments. They understood that Talos 4 had unusual weather patterns. The sensors measured average rainfall, but the humans knew it rained heavily in some areas and barely at all in others. They moved water where it was needed, not where the programs said it should go. Without them, the crops followed the automated schedules. Too much water in some fields, too little in others. Entire harvests were lost. Mina, now working on Earth's agricultural expansion, heard about Talos 4. She still had friends there. She sent them detailed instructions on how to adjust the systems. But her advice was ignored. The automated systems were more efficient, they said, more scientific. Human intuition wasn't needed. The next season's harvest was even worse. Food shortages began spreading across the Union. Not everywhere, not all at once, but enough to notice. Prices increased. People worried. Governments started rationing supplies. Jin watched the news from Earth and shook his head. He had coordinated supplies to Talos 4 for years. He knew exactly when to send extra shipments before the lean seasons. He knew which traders were reliable and which would delay deliveries. He knew 1,000 small details that made the system work. The AI that replaced him knew none of this. It followed optimization algorithms. It chose the cheapest shipping routes and the lowest prices. It was efficient on paper, but in reality, food sat in warehouses because the AI didn't account for local festivals. Shipments were delayed because the AI didn't know which companies would actually deliver on time. The system was breaking. Slowly, quietly. In the diplomatic halls, things were worse. Nari's carefully maintained peace between the Vren and the Lotharii was falling apart. The new Korathi diplomat followed proper procedures. He treated both species exactly the same. He was fair and professional, and both species felt insulted. The Vren needed directness. They wanted quick decisions and clear answers. The formal diplomatic protocols felt like deception to them, like the Union was hiding something. The Lotharii needed ceremony. They wanted traditional greetings and proper respect. The simplified procedures felt like dismissal, like their culture didn't matter. Both species withdrew from meetings. Both felt the other was being unreasonable. The trust that Nari had built over months of careful work disappeared in weeks. We honored the treaty, the Vren ambassador declared. But the Lothari spit on our good faith. We have maintained every agreement, the Lothari responded. But the Vren show us no respect. Both were right. And both were wrong. Nari had been handling hundreds of tiny accommodations that neither species even noticed. She made the Vren feel heard, while making the Lothari feel honored. She translated between two completely different ways of thinking. Without her, they just heard the differences, the conflicts, the insults. The Vren declared the peace treaty void. The Lothari accused them of treachery. 3 other species that depended on Vren-Lothari trade declared neutrality and closed their borders. The Union, which had maintained peace for 10,000 years, was fracturing. Elder Voshkan called an emergency council session. He looked tired. The glow of his crystalline form had dimmed. He had spent the last 6 months putting out fires. Every week brought new crises. Every day brought new problems. We need to find solutions, he told the council. The gate network must be stabilized. The supply chains must be restored. Diplomatic relations must be repaired. We are following all proper procedures, one council member said. Then why isn't it working? Another demanded. Silence filled the chamber. Finally, a young council member spoke. She was from a minor species that had always been friendly with humans. Maybe we need the humans back. The suggestion was met with anger. Outrage. How dare she? The humans had been the problem. They were chaos. They were unpredictable. They broke protocols, but in the back of his mind, Voshkan wondered. He remembered the years before the vote. The Union had worked. Systems had functioned. Diplomatic relations had been stable. Trade had flowed freely, and humans had been everywhere, quietly making it all work. He pushed the thought away. The Union had existed for 10,000 years before humanity. They would solve these problems. They just needed time. Time to adapt. Time to adjust. They had time. The Union was strong. Or so he kept telling himself. Meanwhile, on Earth, the human population was settling into their new lives. It wasn't easy. 4 billion people on one planet was crowded. Resources were tight. But they were managing. Day was working on a project to colonize Mars. Haina was designing new quantum drive systems. Tay was mapping routes through the solar system. Jin had organized Earth's supply networks into something that actually worked. They weren't waiting for the Union to call them back. They were building something new, but they still received messages. Desperate calls from former colleagues across the galaxy. Engineers who couldn't fix the gates. Diplomats who couldn't maintain peace. Logisticians who couldn't keep supplies flowing. And the humans helped when they could. They sent advice. Shared knowledge. Tried to teach from light years away, but it wasn't enough. Because what the Union needed wasn't information. It was people. People who cared about making things work. People who saw a problem and fixed it. Not because it was their job, but because it needed to be fixed. The Union had expelled those people, and now they were paying the price. 1 year after expulsion, the Quantum Gate network was operating at 40% capacity. On some days, it dropped to 30%. Entire regions of the galaxy were cut off for weeks at a time. Thalman hadn't slept in 3 days. He sat in the engineering bay, surrounded by screens showing data he didn't understand. Every diagnostic said the gates were fine. Every sensor reading was within acceptable ranges. But the gates kept failing. He pulled up Hana's old reports. He had read them 100 times. She had written about harmonic frequencies and resonance patterns. About feeling the vibrations. About listening to the machines. But how do you listen to a machine? What did that even mean? In desperation, Thalman sent a message to Earth. He included all his sensor data. All his diagnostic reports. Everything he had. Hana received the message 2 days later. She was in her workshop on Earth, designing a new generation of quantum drives. She stopped her work and reviewed Thalman's data carefully. The problem was obvious to her. Gate 7 was developing a phase variance in the secondary coupling. She could see it in the subtle pattern of the frequency shifts. The sensors wouldn't detect it for another week. By then, the gate would suffer a catastrophic failure. She wrote back with detailed instructions. You need to adjust the phase variance before the fluctuation peaks. You'll feel it in the resonance frequency. There's a subtle shift about 40 seconds before the sensors register anything. Thalman read her message with growing frustration. Feel it? How? He needed numbers, measurements, concrete data he could act on. He wrote back asking for specific parameters, exact thresholds, precise measurements. Hannah's response was simple. There aren't any. That's why you need someone who can feel it. Gate 7 failed 3 days later. A catastrophic collapse that took a week to repair. 30 ships were stranded. 2 more beings died. Thalman stood in front of the destroyed gate and finally understood. The humans hadn't been following procedures that could be taught. They had been doing something that couldn't be written down or measured. They had been sensing things that didn't exist in data, and without them, the gates would continue to fail. The economic impact was devastating. Trade routes that had existed for thousands of years became unreliable. Companies went bankrupt. Colonies ran out of critical supplies. The Union's economy, which had grown steadily for centuries, contracted by 30% in 1 year. People lost jobs, businesses closed, entire industries collapsed. The prosperity that the Union had known for so long was disappearing, and with economic hardship came political chaos. The carefully maintained diplomatic relationships that had kept 47 species cooperating fell apart. Old grudges resurfaced, ancient conflicts reignited. The Vren and Lothari officially ended their peace treaty. Border skirmishes began. Other species chose sides. The Council, which had operated on consensus for 10,000 years, split into factions. Nari watched the news from Earth with sadness. She had spent months building that peace. She had found the tiny compromises that made both species feel respected. Now it was all destroyed. The worst part was knowing it didn't have to be this way. The Vren and Lothari weren't natural enemies. They had lived in peace before. And they could again. They just needed someone to help them see past their differences. But that someone was gone. And the new diplomats didn't understand that peace wasn't about treaties. It was about understanding. About caring enough to learn what each side really needed. On Talos 4, the food crisis had become a disaster. 2 failed harvests in a row. The population was starving. Emergency shipments from other worlds were supposed to help. But the broken gate network meant supplies arrived weeks late. When they arrived at all, Jin coordinated relief efforts from Earth. But he had no authority in Union space. He could only give advice. He told them to prioritize fast-growing crops, to redistribute water manually, to work around the automated systems. But the local government followed the AI's recommendations instead. The AI said the automated systems were more efficient. The data proved it, except the data was wrong. Because data couldn't measure everything. It couldn't predict the unseasonable storm that destroyed the eastern fields. It couldn't account for the equipment breakdown that happened during the critical planting season. It couldn't adjust for the 1,000 small variables that humans handled automatically. Thousands died on Talos 4. It was the Union's first major famine in 3,000 years. The Council met in emergency session again. And again. And again. Every meeting brought bad news. Every report showed declining conditions. The Union was dying, and no one knew how to save it. Elder Voshkan looked around the council chamber. Half the seats were empty. Some species had withdrawn from the Union entirely. Others had stopped sending representatives. The great coalition that had lasted 10 millennia was falling apart. We need solutions, he said, his voice weak. He had aged decades in the past year. The stress had drained him. We need the humans, the young council member said again. This time, no one argued with her. The truth had become impossible to ignore. Every system that had relied on humans was failing. Every human-managed sector was in crisis. The correlation was undeniable. The Union had expelled its stability, its adaptability, its ability to handle the unexpected. How do we bring them back? Another council member asked. We ask, someone suggested. They won't come, another said. We expelled them. Why would they return? Voshkan stood slowly. He looked around at the remnants of the council, at the empty seats, and the worried faces, at the once mighty Union brought to its knees. We don't deserve their help, he said quietly. But we will ask anyway, because we have no choice. The decision was made. A delegation would travel to Earth. They would apologize. They would beg if necessary. They would offer whatever the humans wanted, because without humanity, the Galactic Union would not survive. Voshkan volunteered to lead the delegation personally. It was his responsibility. He had led the campaign against humanity. He had convinced the council to vote for expulsion. This was his mistake to fix. If it could be fixed, the journey to Earth took 3 weeks because the direct gates were no longer functional. They had to use slower routes, older methods. It gave Voshkan time to think, time to remember. He remembered the Union before humanity. It had been stable, predictable, orderly, but also stagnant. Growth had been slow. Innovation had been rare. Problems were solved by committee over years or decades. Then humans had arrived. Chaotic, unpredictable, impatient. They didn't wait for committees. They saw problems and fixed them. They broke protocols and found better ways. They connected species that had never worked together before. The Union had become dynamic, vibrant, alive in ways it hadn't been for thousands of years. And they had thrown it away. Because it was uncomfortable. Because humans didn't fit the old patterns. Because change was scary. Now the Union was dying. And Voshkan was traveling to Earth to beg for help from the people he had expelled. The irony wasn't lost on him. When they finally reached Earth's orbital station, Voshkan felt small. The humans had built all this in just 1 year. New stations. New habitats. New ships. They had taken 4 billion refugees and not just survived, they had thrived. Because that's what humans did. They adapted. They built. They solved problems. Sung, the historian, met them at the docking bay. He had known they would come. He had been watching the Union's decline and documenting everything. This meeting would be an important entry in his records. Elder Voshkan, Sung said formally, welcome to Earth. Voshkan looked at the human. There was no anger in his eyes. No satisfaction at seeing the mighty Korathi brought low. Just calm observation. We need to speak with your government. Voshkan said. We don't have a unified government, Sung replied. We never did. That always bothered your people. Then who do we negotiate with? What do you want to negotiate? Voshkan's pride crumbled. The Union is dying. We need your people back. Please. We will pay any price. Sung was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. Come with me. There are people you need to meet. Sung led the delegation through Earth's orbital station. Voshkan noticed everything was clean and efficient. Ships came and went, with perfect timing. Workers moved with purpose. Everything worked. It was exactly how Union Central used to be. Before, they entered a conference room. Sung gestured for them to sit. Wait here. I'll bring the people you need to speak with. Voshkan sat with his delegation. They were all tired from the long journey, more tired from watching their civilization crumble over the past year. They waited in silence. The door opened. Day walked in first. He wore simple work clothes. His hands had calluses from manual labor. He looked older than Voshkan, remembered. Behind him came Hana, then Tay. Jin entered next, followed by Nari. Mina came last. They all sat down across from the Korathi delegation. There was a long silence. Voshkan didn't know how to start. How do you apologize for something so terrible? How do you ask for help from people you cast out? I'll begin, Day said. You want humans to return to the Union. To fix what's broken. Am I right? Voshkan nodded. Yes. Please. We were wrong. We see that now. You were wrong about what, exactly? Hana asked. Her voice wasn't angry. Just curious. Voshkan struggled to find words. We thought humans were the problem. That you brought chaos. That the Union would be better without you. And? Nari prompted. We were wrong. The Union is collapsing. Gates are failing. Trade has stopped. People are starving. Diplomatic relations have fallen apart. Everything is broken. Tay leaned forward. But why is it broken? You have all our documentation, all our procedures, all our technical specifications. Why can't you fix it? This was the hard part. The part Voshkan had been avoiding thinking about. Because you didn't just follow procedures. You did something more. Something we can't teach or measure or replicate. We cared, Jin said simply. The words hit Voshkan hard, because they were true. The humans had cared. Not because it was efficient or logical or part of their job description. They had cared because that's who they were. Yes, Voshkan admitted. You cared. And we didn't appreciate that until it was gone. Nari looked at the elder. Do you understand what you're asking? You want us to come back and fix everything. But what happens when things are stable again? Will you expel us again when we become inconvenient? No. Voshkan said immediately. Never. We will give you guarantees, legal protections, council representation, whatever you need. Words, Mina said. You gave us promises before. You said we were valued members of the Union. Then you voted us out. Why should we believe you now? It was a fair question. Voshkan had no good answer. He had been part of the vote. He had led the campaign against humanity. His words meant nothing. You shouldn't believe me, he said finally. I've given you no reason to trust me. But please believe this. The Union is dying. Thousands have already died. Thousands more will die. Not because of war or disease, because systems are failing, because no one knows how to fix them, because the people who held everything together are gone. Day stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at Earth below. We've built something here. In 1 year, we've made a new home. We're colonizing Mars. We're planning missions to the outer planets. We're finally together. All of us. Building something that's ours. I understand, Voshkan said. You have no reason to give that up. Not for us, but people are dying, Hana said quietly. People who did nothing wrong. People who are suffering because their leaders made mistakes. The room fell silent again. Nari spoke first. If we return, it will be on our terms. Real council representation. Not token seats, but actual power. Human rights protected by union law. Guarantees that can't be voted away. Yes, Voshkan agreed immediately. Anything. And we don't all come back, Jin added. Some of us will stay on Earth, build our own civilization. We need a backup plan. In case you change your minds again. That's fair, Vosh, Khan said. Tay looked at his fellow humans. We should talk about this, privately. The Korathi delegation left the room. They waited outside for hours. Voshkan could hear muffled voices through the door. Arguments. Debates. He couldn't make out the words. Finally, the door opened. Day gestured for them to return. We'll help, Day said. But it won't be like before. We're not just workers anymore. We're partners. Equal members of the Union with full rights and representation. Yes, Voshkan said. I'll present it to the council personally. And we start small, Hana added. A few teams at first. We fix the most critical problems. Prove that cooperation can work. Then we decide about a larger return. It took 6 months to negotiate the details. Nari led the talks, with human legal experts drafting protections that couldn't be easily overturned. The council agreed to everything. They had no choice. The first human teams returned to Union space. Hana led an engineering group to restore the quantum gate network. It took her 3 months to repair what had collapsed over 2 years, not because the work was hard, but because she had to teach a new generation of engineers how to listen to the machines. You can't just trust the sensors, she explained to Thalman for what felt like the 100th time. Put your hand here. Feel that vibration? That's normal. Now feel this one? That's different. Subtle, but different. That means trouble is coming, Thalman tried. He really tried. Some days he almost understood. Other days it made no sense. But he kept learning. And slowly, the gates became more stable. Jin restructured the logistics networks. He placed human coordinators at major hubs, but he also trained alien partners. The AI is a tool, he explained. Use it for calculations, but you still need judgment. You need to understand that numbers don't tell the whole story. Day's engineering teams moved from system to system, fixing equipment, training workers, sharing knowledge. They moved with quiet efficiency, the same way they always had. Nari returned to the diplomatic corps. Her first task was the Vren Lothari situation. She met with both ambassadors separately first. I'm not here to take sides, she told them. I'm here to help you understand each other. If you want peace, I can facilitate it. If you want war, I'll leave you to it. Both species wanted peace. They were tired of fighting. But they didn't know how to stop. Nari rebuilt the bridges between them. Small steps, tiny accommodations, making the Vren feel heard, making the Lotharii feel respected. It took 8 months, but the peace treaty was signed again, stronger this time, based on real understanding. 5 years after the expulsion, the Union was functioning again. Not perfectly. Some species never returned. Some trust could never be fully restored. The Union had scars that would never heal, but it survived. The gate network operated at 90% capacity. Trade flowed. Supply chains were stable. Diplomatic relations were strong. People stopped starving. The economy recovered, and humans were woven throughout it all. Not as outcasts or second-class members. As equals. As partners. As valued members of a civilization they helped save. Vashkan retired from the council. He was too old now. Too tired. But before he left, he visited Sung. One last time. The historian was still documenting everything, adding to his massive record of the expulsion and return. Why did your people come back? Voshkan asked. After what we did to you, why did you help us? Sung thought about it for a long time. Do you know what makes humans different? It's not that we're smarter, or stronger, or more special. It's that we see something broken, and we have to fix it, not because it benefits us, not because someone ordered us to, because that's who we are. We thought you brought chaos, Voshkan said. We do bring chaos, Sung agreed. Because order isn't natural. Systems don't run themselves. Peace doesn't maintain itself. It all takes work. Constant. Daily work. Making small adjustments. Fixing tiny problems before they become big ones. Caring about the details that seem unimportant. We took that for granted. Yes. You thought the Union ran on rules and procedures. But it ran on people. On humans who cared enough to make it work. Voshkan looked out at the busy orbital station. Humans and aliens working side by side. Ships coming and going. Life continuing. We almost destroyed everything, he said quietly. But you didn't, Sung replied. You made a mistake. You admitted it. You asked for help. That takes courage. Will the Union survive? Sung smiled. As long as there are people who care about making it work, it will survive. And humans will always care. Even when we shouldn't. Even when we've been hurt, we see something broken, we fix it. That's our gift. And our curse. Voshkan stood to leave. At the door, he turned back. Thank you. For saving us. Thank you for learning, Sung said. That's all we ever wanted. To be seen. To be valued. To be understood. The old Korathi left. Sung turned back to his records. He made his final entry. Year 5. The Union recovered. Humanity returned. Not as servants. Not as outsiders. As equals. The lesson has been learned. For now, outside, the galaxy continued. Ships traveled through stable gates. Trade flourished. Diplomats negotiated in good faith. Agricultural worlds produced abundant harvests. Systems worked, and throughout it all, humans did what they had always done. They fixed things. They helped people. They made the impossible work. Not for glory or recognition. Because they cared. Because that's what humans did. The galaxy was stable once more. And this time, everyone understood why.